Welcome to Becoming Impactful, where we challenge conventions, break barriers, and embrace wisdom beyond stereotypes. I'm your host, Anthony Nayagan. Well, you have heard the old adage, a spiritual master of wisdom must be an old man from Asia, donning a great beard, round glasses, and radiating excessive compassion. But today, we shatter that mold. Meet our guest, Sarah Hussain, a force of intellect and insight, a thinker who dares to redefine what it means to be a spiritual leader. She is a young lady, a philosopher, engineer, and a scientist, a radical thinker, and unapologetically devoted to the truth as she sees it.
Oh, wonderful. That's
Prepared to be challenged, inspired, and enlightened. This is not just a conversation. This is a revolution of thought. So let's dive in. Sarah Hussain, the founder, is the person you want to reach out to for change in your life. She is now a successful spiritual and subconscious transformation coach with over 300 individuals already in her portfolio in the past 2 years. She is also a consciousness teacher, a researcher, drawing parallels between spirituality, science, and philosophy to give a deeper meaning and understanding about our consciousness, the power we hold within, and what we can attain with our consciousness in our lives. So let's welcome Sarah Hussain. Sarah, would you say hello?
hello, Anthony.
Hi.
I'm so humbled by that amazing intro. Thank you very
Oh,
much. That was really kind.
all right. So let's talk about um, transformation coach. What does it entail? Could you describe what it means?
Yeah, transformation coach in simple words is a coach that helps you go through a change in your life. And that could be a change in any or many aspects of your life. The reason I say transformation, because the kind of work I do, which is a spiritual and subconscious transformation. So, as a spiritual reader, I'm able to access people's consciousness. I know we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it during the session. But being able to read people's consciousness helps me clearly pinpoint what it is that they're struggling with. So sometimes people have patterns that are going on for a number of years because of something that had happened in the past, something that happened in the childhood. So it's really, Anthony, about figuring out those underlying reasons, surfacing them, and healing them all together, and that it becomes a source of transformation for people.
See, you're talking about subconsciousness transformation. So, but could you explain what is consciousness as you see it?
Yeah. So consciousness is, first of all, there are two kinds of conscious, because sometimes people go, is it the the fact that I'm awake? Is it being conscious? Let's call it the small c. So being conscious, having conscious thoughts, that's one part of it. But the one that I'm referring to is your electromagnetic aura. What I'm referring to is your soul. So that's the consciousness, which is a part of the collective consciousness in this world. And so that's the consciousness that when we are working together, I am accessing to derive information, to derive insight, to derive wisdom from in order to help.
So, in other words, what you are saying is there is a difference between the consciousness associated with our mindfulness
Yeah.
and there is a consciousness beyond.
Yeah.
or much
Right.
deeper?
Yeah, yeah. So there is,
Okay.
that because the in the scientific language, there is the conscious, the act of being conscious, the act of being awake. And then the consciousness that I'm referring to is your soul in a spirituality. But in other words, through scientific nature, you can say, I'm referring to your entire being and the electromagnetic aura that the being exudes.
Then I'm going into another question. All right. Then what is the difference between a mindful consciousness and subconsciousness?
Um, Being mindful or being conscious is essentially being awake, right? When we're conscious, that means we're awake. When we're unconscious, we're not awake, we're asleep, or we're not, in our wakeful state. The consciousness we're referring to over here, let's put it simply as our soul. It is the divine entity that is within us.
Okay.
And so we have, that's the whole premise of what I do as a researcher is to find intellectual reasoning in the realm of science to consciousness, which we experience as a soul, or we call it higher self at times. There are different terminologies, but they essentially refer to the same thing. The higher being that we all are is our consciousness.
So, in other words, what you are saying is um, our subconscious mind or the subconsciousness is pretty much the gateway to much deeper realizations and much deeper spiritual journey, meaningful spiritual transformations. Is that what you're
Um,
saying?
what I'm saying essentially is that, the subconscious is separate and our consciousness is separate.
Okay.
So the subconscious mind is a part of the brain that is not part of the conscious brain, not the awake state, but the part of our brain which stores memory, data, habits, programming, things like that. So that's a part of the brain that typically drives how we behave, how we act, what we do, how we think, etc. The conscious brain is the wakeful state, right? That stores information that we need to do, for example, things to remember, etc., etc. um, when we're talking about the subconscious transformation or the subconscious programming, we're essentially talking about the patterns we have in our way of thinking, the patterns we have in our way of behaving, and the patterns we have emotionally, which derive our lives. So when people go through a subconscious transformation, they're essentially targeting those patterns and they're realizing what kind of pattern is bringing them what kind of result. And then there is an array of things. Sometimes emotional patterns are because of childhood, how the household was. And sometimes behavioral patterns are because of that too, mostly, not sometimes, because of the way we're brought up. And so we really start to, Anthony, touch on where we started as we started life. Because the subconscious brain picked up information even when we were in the womb. And as it was picking up information, it was making belief systems and it was rewiring itself. So then when we grow up and we become, aware of how we think and how we act, we go like, this is the person I've become because of the things I've experienced so far. And what I'm really nailing on is your ability to change the person you are after becoming aware of it by changing the programming you have in within.
Okay. Um, all right. I mean, here is the thing. See, when we are talking about science, philosophy, and spirituality, which is going to be my next question,
Yeah.
um, we as spiritual masters always dealing with the challenge of trying to make an empirical case of something that is so incredibly abstract and so incredibly moving and so incredibly vibrant, but we have to make an empirical case of it. So the discussions we are having, although it's kind of moving between abstract and empirical, okay, we are talking about a phenomenon, in other words, which is very hard to make an empirical case of. Spirituality is not an ordered progression.
Mm-hmm.
It is very, very abstract. It's incredibly deep. But we as human beings, we as individuals, we are still dealing with the Newtonian physics, and we are still dealing with, schools that are ordered and based on theories of causation and all of that. You mean we are still learning classical physics in school, and we still think that memorizing the atomic tables and think that every chemical is interacting, by way of an atom.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
The quantum physics have changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
So now, here we are going to have a discussion with Sarah about science, philosophy, and spirituality, and how she reconciles all of these.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take it up?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very fascinating subject for me.
Yeah.
Because when I first started my journey, that was during COVID.
Uh-huh.
And I started listening to this book called The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. And that is where it all started for me. Because before that, I hadn't really gotten a chance to really dive deep into spirituality. And a lot of my questions have started to emerge. Who are we? Why are we all connected? Where is consciousness stemming from? How do we lead purposeful lives, etc., etc.? So I wanted to basically, I went on a mission to understand that, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to understand it through physics. I wanted to understand it through science because I felt like there's a lot of spirituality out there, and yet I'm not able to get the concept that clearly in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is when I came across various researchers who are researching on consciousness and have done amazing work. And what I learned, Anthony, was that a lot of the physical concepts are synonymous to the universal teachings in spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
A small concept. So I'm going to go simple because the listeners may not, I just want to be mindful that I don't want to be too difficult to understand. So just a simplistic manner, for example, a simplistic concept is the concept of karma,
Mm-hmm.
the concept of doing good and reaping good.
Mm-hmm.
And in physics, what physics says is that every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
And that goes consistently everywhere in all areas of physics. So, unless there is vacuum. But so that was exciting for me because that kind of started to, open a gate for me. I was like, oh, simple physics, things that we have learned, things that we can avail easily through a textbook or the library, can really give explanations to deeper concepts of spirituality and philosophy. And it becomes easier to understand, and that also became my path. I wanted to study it more. So that is one concept, Anthony, that's coming to me. Another one was so let's just talk about karma before I move on to the other one. So for instance, karma is a very important thing in a spirituality. Essentially what karma means is how you behave with other people. The good you put out in the universe is the good you receive back. And it could come in the form of anything, right? That's what we learn. And in physics, because every action has an equal and opposite reaction, doing anything out energetically, even energetically, means you're going to be bringing the same thing in towards you. That's just the law of nature.
Well, actually, karma is much deeper than that.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because karma also includes the consciousness of altered states. Okay. um, meaning, consciousness of your previous life. See, the consciousness that we are talking about, it didn't start with us taking
Oh
birth.
yeah, for sure.
You know, it
It's not limited to our current lifetime.
yeah,
It is,
and our life
yeah,
itself and our consciousness, they both of them are of an infinite nature. See, when you're talking about something that is infinite, infinity does not have a beginning. Infinity does not have an end. You see, so here we are born as human beings once again, and we have inherited all of those things that happened in the past, and that is embedded in our consciousness. See, in order for us to kind of see what it is, um, we don't need to go so far because there's quite a bit of information about it in our subconsciousness itself.
yeah,
Okay, there's a lot of information about it. As long as we can delve into our subconsciousness and be at peace with our subconsciousness,
yeah.
then we can recognize and we can just come to terms with not only the karmas of this life, but karmas of previous lives as well.
And I agree with that because
Yeah,
our consciousness at the current moment
yeah.
is not just a result of this life. It
No,
is the
it's not. Yeah,
uh, it is a result of the lives lived before. It's also the result of our ancestral attachments and whatnot.
absolutely.
Basic concept of karma, of what you do is what you reap, stands valid, with those lives too. So the concept, what I'm trying to merge here is the physics behind it is simple. What you do is what you reap, right? What you put out in the world is what you're going to get back. And you're right about the fact that our consciousness currently has karma coming from a long karma coming from the past lives. There are a lot of factors that play into the karma we have accumulated in the current state. And the equation of the karma stays the same. That is, if there's good for you in your karma, you're going to receive good. And if there is not good for you, there's something that you have to, compensate for. There's something that you have to cover up from the past lives and whatnot. Then that also includes you doing good for other people in the current life. So the exchange of energy is identical. Good for good, bad for bad, those kind of things.
See, life of spiritual realization, it is not a result of causation, it is a result of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? In other words, spiritual realization has to make you a fullness of your being.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that, say, for instance, it's known as anthropos. Okay? Anthropos means fullness of being. See, when you become fullness of being, you are in fact liberating yourself. You are liberating yourself from all of these cause and effect karmic consequences. See, and when you become fullness of being, the end result is actually moksha in this life, not moksha in the life to come, moksha in this life itself. That is what many religions teach us. You see, in Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and even in Islam, they talk about the realization of 7 heavens in this life. See, when you are realized of that 7th heaven, you are liberated, and you are a fullness of being. See, the only one thing that you are left with is pure joy and delight and total enlightenment. So it's not a life of causation. It is not a life that binds you to something. It is a life that totally liberates you. See, um, I can actually cite you a variety of saints. You
Um,
see,
yeah, and I do understand what you're saying, and
yeah,
absolutely, it is
yeah,
liberating when you get to that point.
yeah,
Um, and how you get to that point, as you were saying, Anthony, it is about being liberated in
yeah,
life. And that's a very beautiful way to put it.
yeah,
If a normal person wants to get to that point, he's going to notice that that requires him to start having a transformation in within.
yeah. In other words, there is a starting point to it.
There
That's
is
what you are
starting
saying.
point
Absolutely, I agree with that.
is there. And the
Yeah,
journey entails that we purify ourselves, right?
yeah,
We have
yeah,
so much goodness in ourselves that we elevate spiritually.
yeah,
So that is how my awakening happened, is that I had to really make use of my mind to
yeah.
think and be positive. That also meant being good, purifying my soul, forgiving people, forgetting, letting go, those kind of things which are difficult, which are really a real test.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's a part
See,
of our journey.
I
Yeah.
mean, there is a famous saying of Rumi, by the way. You know who that is. And he says that you are the drop itself and you are the ocean itself.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so the ocean begins with a drop, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see, so where do we start? As a drop.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
from there on, you
Very
are going
important.
to become an ocean. So when you are an ocean, the concept of drop doesn't even exist there.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you are an ocean.
Right.
You see, that is that's a quote of Rumi. I love a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. Um, with that, I'm going to read a quote to you, and this is by Ernest Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about it. Would you
Yeah.
like that?
Sure.
Okay. He says, life is infinite energy coupled with limitless creative imagination. It is the invisible essence and substance of every visible form. Its nature is goodness, truth, wisdom, and beauty, as well as energy and imagination. Our highest satisfaction comes from a sense of conscious union with this invisible life. All human endeavor is an attempt to get back to first principles to find such an inward wholeness that all sense of fear, doubt, and uncertainty vanishes. So that is the first step you are talking about. Our human endeavor is an attempt to get back
Yeah.
to first principles, to
Right.
find such an inward wholeness
Mm-hmm.
that all sense of fear, doubt, and uncertainty vanishes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, how do you feel about this quote?
It's very beautiful. It's also very true.
Yeah, all right. So let's talk about it. Okay, when we talk about life energy, life energy is what you described as consciousness,
Yep.
which is beyond mindful state, which is beyond the awakened state.
Mm.
And then it says it's coupled with limitless creative imagination. What do you feel about that? Let's talk about it.
I feel that is what got me excited when it came to diving into spirituality,
Mm-hmm,
because of the limitless nature of our consciousness in itself.
mm-hmm,
And I felt almost obliged, because I thought that, okay, I'm living this life. I have access to unlimited creative imagination. I have access to resourcefulness that is unlimited.
mm-hmm,
And the reason I'm struggling so much, because at the time I was, in my reality, is because I have not allowed myself to access this unlimited nature of myself.
mm-hmm,
As beings, we're dual. We're physical beings, but we also have spiritual beings. We're also spiritual beings. And so, as I started to meditate,
mm-hmm,
because I wanted to dive deep into this spiritual realm, um, I started to witness that resourcefulness firsthand. And I realized that actually, the abundance people quote, the spiritualists quote, or the masters quote, and what we read about in books and what we read about in, poetry and whatnot, that abundance really exists in the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting relationship I formed with my higher self, you can say.
Yeah.
Because it was almost coming to realization of how much there is support for me, and that really the challenges of life they're just blessings in disguise to help me get back to that state of mind.
Right.
And so what started to happen, Anthony, for me was I started to dive deep into this resourcefulness during
Uh-huh.
meditations. And that is, um, when my gifts awakened as well. And I would notice a great sense of freedom and a great sense of love and belonging there. And what started to happen for me was that how to go through any challenging situation in life was very easy then, because my intuition would be very, very strong. I would know exactly how to maneuver through that situation. And then, my old self slowly was getting transformed, and my new self was becoming. I was now becoming whole as a person, understanding what my role is in the world and how much of an influence my spiritual relationship is going to have on my life. So, yeah, I walked that journey by myself, and from being very, very stuck and being very frustrated about challenges in life, I came to a state where I was very grateful. I was so grateful that I could tear up at any moment, and I felt and saw only abundance for me. And all areas of my life changed. It took some time, but all areas of my life changed. Everything became quite beautiful, quite abundant, quite full of love. And it all started from, that just being in a very bad state for me. So the realization that we are more than just our human self, and that we are connected to the spiritual realm, and we are a part of the mastermind, the collective consciousness of the world, is is a big asset to learn. It's a big asset to know. And after which your life really does transform for the better, because your consciousness is affecting your reality directly. Your reality is pretty much a reflection of your consciousness. So when you feel so abundant and so loved and so resourceful, that's exactly what you're going to be seeing in your reality. So yeah, that's like my feedback.
I need to ask you a question. Did you go through all of these transformations by yourself, or did you have someone else helping you?
I got some help. So my mom actually was going through her own spiritual transformation.
Okay.
She had a teacher, and she went to that teacher, and he told her that your daughter, number three, because we're six daughters,
Okay.
he said, Sarah, she has some spiritual gifts, and she has, some kind of spiritual relationship. So I have like a
Yes.
lot of good beings with me. And he's like, you should ask her to meditate and focus on her third eye, because that will awaken her gifts for her.
Hmm.
And he basically signaled that she's going to be up to something when it comes to spirituality. Like, I have
Hmm.
something going on. So when my mom told me, she was on the phone, and she was telling me how, like, I should start meditating because I have like some spiritual influence that is really positive. I'm surrounded by positive beings, and her teacher said that. I said that, oh, I know that I'm surrounded by positive beings because I feel them all the time. And at that time, I was living by myself in an apartment in downtown. So I was just mostly by myself. But the amount of love I would experience alone in that apartment was extraordinary. And I was quite lonely because, again, remember, it started with challenging times in life. So I was quite lonely. A lot of my friends were not in the city. I was not getting the job I wanted. I was not getting the relationship I wanted. It was difficult for me. And I remember my mom telling me this, and I was like, oh, I already know it because, I feel so much love by the beings around me. Even though I'm lonely in my life, I feel that I'm taken care of. And that's all I thought she was talking about. But she said, why don't you sit down and really meditate? So I said, okay. And I started meditating, and I started to focus on my third eye, and I would meditate. Um, and the teacher mentioned that she should meditate on the third eye, and then it will be fine. Like, she doesn't need more guidance after that. So I did that. Um, and yeah, I think after that, I when I started meditating on my third eye, excuse me, um, it was quite abrupt when the changes started happening for me. Um, from being someone, who's experiencing light and positive energy around me, I started to see things. So that was quite magnificent for me because I had not seen things before. I'd felt them and I would intuitively know of them, but now I was seeing beings who are positive and who are so loving, and ancestral beings who would tell me that, they've been with me before, and then I would have a little bit of memory that I've met them. So that is, yeah, a whole different journey started. And then I felt that I'm basically in the middle of two states: the worldly life, and then the afterlife, you can say, or the spiritual life, as though I'm not in the world, but I'm in a state where I'm accessing the other states. So I felt like I'm two different worlds. Um, and so that was very, very fascinating for me. Um, but what was most fascinating was that when I would meet someone, and it all started from my mom, because she was like, she came from her vacation after meeting her teacher, and then she said that, why don't you look through now that you're able to see and tell me what happened, when I was 20 years old, when I was not born, basically, when I was not, I was born when she was 29 years old or 28 years old. So she's like, tell me what happened with my neighbor when I was 20 years old. Tell me what happened when I was 21 years old. The times of her life that I have not seen and that she has never disclosed to me. And I would be able to see through space and time as to what happened, how she looked like, what happened to the neighbor, how somebody passed away, what happened with them. And I was able to, and this was the surprising part for me, I was able to communicate with those consciousness that was alive at that time and tell what had happened. And so that just changed everything for me, because when I started to then access knowledge through space and time, and I was talking to beings that were before me, and I was having a one-on-one conversation, then I realized that I'm meant to be helping, and I have a different journey to submit myself to.
Well, that's a gift. That really is a gift and a grace. And you
That is
are
a
a very blessed soul.
Thank you very much.
So you're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So having said that, let's bring this to a close. Okay. And I hope to see you again. It's a fascinating discussion. And I would love to have ongoing discussions with you sometimes
Yeah.
in the near future. I
Right.
hope there is an accommodation for me. Okay. But thank you for showing up. And it really is quite a remarkable um, interview, I would say. Um, and you certainly have the gift and the grace.
Thank you very
And
much.
so just make your contribution
Yeah.
impactful.
Yep.
Make it impactful.
As I must just spread it. Yep.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. And
Make it
you're
impactful.
welcome.
In other words, that's really what the creative imagination is all about.
Mm-hmm.
The creative imagination must come with the intention of an emotion, meaning it's an emotion, a selfless emotion. Okay, um, in spirituality and in in every context, they call that love. Okay, but you see, an impact should have three elements. Okay, the first one is an event. The second one is the emotion that event communicates. Then the third one, becomes the final impact. Okay, without emotion, you cannot create lasting impacts.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's when you are talking about making an impact, you need to communicate emotion.
I agree.
For everything that you do must communicate emotion. See, and it has to communicate selflessly.
Yeah.
See, when it communicates an emotion selflessly, whatever you do will stand the test of time.